All right. So we're doing Pirkei Avos tonight. Oh, we don't know you're sitting there? Okay, fine. And title of tonight's class is Who Knows For? Why Who Knows For? There's a little takeoff on the famous Zemer that we say during the Nirtza part of the Haggadah. We say Echad Min Adeh, who knows one, who knows two, who knows three, and you go through a bunch of numbers. And you talk about the significance of those numbers in Yiddishkeit. Well, interestingly enough, the fifth parak of Pirkei Avos is such a parak. It goes through a lot of numbers. It talks about the number 10, and then the number 7, and so on. And the reason why I skipped to the middle of the parak, number 4, besides the fact that I find these Mishnayos very fascinating, is that 4 to me always resonated as a supremely significant number in Judaism, because Hashem's name is a 4-letter word, because so much taka of the Passover Haggadah deals with the number 4 questions, 4 cups of wine, 4 expressions of Geula, 4 types of sons. The 4 is a loaded number. And I just want to look at a couple of Mishnayos that deal with the number 4. So let's take a look on page 574 on the Art Scroll Siddur. Okay, different Mishnayos have different, not just pagination, they have different numbers for how to number the Mishnayos, how to break up the Mishnayos. So according to Rabbi Art Scroll over here, it's Mishnah Yud Gimel. Mishnah Yud Gimel says, Arba Midas Ba'adam. Homer Shali Shali V'Shalach Shalach. Zaymida Beinanis. V'yesh Amrim Zaymida Sdaim. Shali Shalach V'Shalcha Shali. Am Haaretz. Shali Shalcha V'Shalcha Shalach Chassid. Shalcha Shali V'Shali Shali Rasha. Okay, the English translation is, there are 4 character types among people. One who says, my property is mine, and yours is yours. More literally, it will be what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. Shali, that which is mine is mine. Shalcha, shalcha. This is an average character type. Okay, by average, the word Beinani usually, in Talmudic jargon, mediates between tzaddik and rasha. Tzaddik is a righteous person, and rasha is a guilty person. Beinani is a middling person, somewhere in the middle. But some say this characteristic of Sdom. Okay? Sdom, usually when we think of Sdom in the popular imagination, we're thinking of a place of depraved sexual license. Right? But according to Chazal, and even according to Nevi'im, Sdom was very, very depraved in terms of their notions of social justice, or I should say lack of social justice. Sdom is a place where people were persecuted for Achnasas Archim. If you were Mavisayda last week, you know that the Rashi about why Lot's wife was punished by turning into a pillar of salt is because when the Archim, when the wayfarers came to Lot's house, and she went and she asked the people to borrow salt, and parenthetically, she being a daughter of Sdom, whispered to us, Af minag razu hichnis lan. This bad custom of actually providing lodging, free lodging for wayfarers, he's trying to inculcate our city with that. A famous mice in the Gemara about the stone bed, where they would have a wayfarer, and it was a one-size-fits-all bed. If you didn't fit the bed right, they would either put you on the rack to stretch you out to make sure you did fit, or if you were too tall, they would lop off your feet or decapitate you, and so on. Especially when it came to Achnas Zarchim, to that division, that subdivision of Gemilas Chasadim, the people of Sodom were terrible. And the time of the Mishnah is identifying that with being a very, we would think, a just, straight-laced, straight-shooting kind of attitude towards property. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. I'm not trying to take what's yours, but let's have a clear definition. What belongs to me, and what belongs to you. And what's mine is mine, and what yours is yours. Okay, well, I'll share with you what some of the Mefarshim have to say. But first, let's just get through the translation of the Mishnah. Mine is yours, and yours is mine, is an unlearned person. This fellow is the polar opposite of what we said before. He seems to have no sense whatsoever of personal property. On the one hand, he's very generous. He says, what's mine is yours. But then he turns around and he says, oh, but by the way, what's yours is mine. So that sounds like a thief speaking. Shalih, shalach, v'shalach, shalach. Mine is yours and yours is scrupulously pious. Okay, the Hebrew word is a chassid. Okay, he's going above and beyond the call of duty. All right? Not only letting you keep yours, but he's willing to give away his. Yours is mine, and mine is wicked. Okay, that's somebody who you'll call a chamson, somebody who is transgressive of the last of the 10 Commandments, lo sachbod, thou shalt not covet. He thinks what belongs to other person should belong to him as well. Or maybe he goes beyond that. It's not just a question of feeling. He's actually acquisitive of the other person's things. That's a rasha.
So you're not a chassid unless you go above and beyond?
I wouldn't say that. There are many Mishnayos and Pirkei Avos that talk about chassid, including a few in this sequence of the 4 different character types of people. They're saying in terms of relationship to somebody's property, we've delineated 4 categories here: Beinani, Am Haaretz, Chassid, and Rasha. In terms of relationship to property, that's the attitude of a chassid, to give away yours. Is that the one and only defining characteristic of a chassid? No. But in terms of attitude towards property, that's the way a chassid looks at property. Okay. So first of all, I want to mention to you the nevuah, of the Navi Yecheskel. Yecheskel Tazayin Memtes, chapter 16, verse 49, it says as follows: Hine zeh haya avoin Sdaim achesecha. This was the sin of Sdaim, your sister. Okay, the Navi Yecheskel obviously is living many generations after the overturning of the city of Sdom. He's addressing a Jewish audience. Nevertheless, he's calling Sdom the sister of the Jewish people by comparing their level of sin. Gain, pride, sveas lechem, satiated with bread, they always had enough to eat. Veshalvis hashket, and they dwelled in tranquility. They didn't have to fight a lot of wars. Hayala. All of that belonged to Steinville of Neisah, and to her daughters it means the suburban, the greater Sdom area. They never held out, they never supported the hands of an ani and an evian, of the poor and the destitute. Okay, so now the question is like this. This is a very interesting question. How can you call in one fell swoop, you try walking up to a literate person today and call them a sodomite, okay? If they're not gay and you call them a sodomite, they're going to take very deep offense. If they know the connotation for religious people, for people with a sense even of world history, of world anthropology, what Sodom represents, it's not a compliment to be called a sodomite. Right? So it's a very odd thing that in one Mishnah, the same type of midah should be called Beinadi. Beinadi is an average person, a middling person, right? Oh no, maybe you're like the people of Sodom. What's going on over here? So there's a lot of talk in the Rishonim how this can be. How the same midah, the same attitude towards personal property can be both that of a Beinani and that of somebody from Sdom. So this is how the Rabbi Yan explains it. He says as follows: we're not talking about when a person says shali, shali, v'shalach, shalach, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. That sounds like a person who, if you looked at their tax return on the charitable contributions, would have a big fat zero. Why in the world should I give you anything? Am I asking you for anything? Don't ask me for anything of mine. I'm not giving you anything. So Rabbi says that's not what the Mishnah is talking about. That would be a rasha. That wouldn't be a Beinani. We wouldn't be looking for similes to Sdom. That's a rasha. But he says as follows. He says that the Beinani that's described over here in the Mishnah is somebody who does give tzedakah. However, he's giving tzedakah, he says, because of Yiras Shamayim. His teva, his nature, is very stingy. His natural attitude is I don't really grasp the tzedek of tzedakah. If anybody's interested, I'll email them. I had a 3-part lecture series about a year and a half ago on tzedakah, and one of the main points of that series is how the Jewish concept of tzedakah, if you just look at the etymology of the word, okay, the root of the word is not about softness of heart or tenderness or volunteerism. It's about justice. Tzedakah is rooted in the word tzedek. Right? It's not a fair society if it's a society in which there's not some redistribution of the wealth. There's not something going from the richer to the poorer. There's a lack of justice at play here. Right? So, if I can embellish the Rabbi a little bit over here, this guy doesn't have an outraged sense of injustice when he sees poverty all around him. Right? He's a stingy person. He feels, look, that's the way the cards were dealt. I'm rich, you're poor, and that's how it should be. I'm not asking you for anything. If the shoe was on the foot, I wouldn't ask you for anything. Don't ask me for anything. However, there's an obligation to Torah to give tzedakah. I'll give tzedakah. But he's a stingy person. And in his heart of hearts, he doesn't feel he needs to be giving this or he should be giving this. That's a banani. Somebody who really gives in to that stingy character and his Yirah Shamayim cannot overcome it and cause him to give tzedakah, that's already the meat of Sdom. The hard-heartedness of the people of Sdom was really rooted in this attitude of what we would call, look, what's fair is fair. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours.
But it was more than that. They would also rape and kill and murder, and that's like even further than what's mine is mine.
And they would kill you if you were doing chesed.
Pardon me?
And would they kill you if you were trying to do chesed? And,
yes.
I think this week or last week.
Okay.
It got worse.
That's a very, very, very good question. But my sense is, from the time of this Mishnah, what he's saying is, it's kind of like when you look at Avodah Zarah and crazy Avodah Zarah practices of the ancient world, right? It started from a little minor mistake in theology, according to the Rambam. The Rambam explains that in the Dor Enosh, the people decided, look, God is busy with all kinds of cosmic important things, right? I have a pothole on my street. I don't write a letter to the President of the United States. I write my local councilman, my city councilman, and maybe even somebody lower on the political hierarchy than that. So that was the idea. The idea was we need intermediaries to pray to, and we should honor those kaviyachol who Hashem has delegated authority to. And slowly but surely, a slippery slope, it culminated in human sacrifice and all kinds of sacred harlots and all kinds of depravities that we associate with the ancient pagan cults. My understanding, what the Tana is saying is, yes, we all know about the excesses and the unbelievable cruelty of Sodom. But if you want to know where it starts with this kind of an attitude. In other words, basically what they're saying is the slippage between Beinani and Sodomi, and ultimately the Russia who says, Shali Shali, V'shalach Shali, what's mine is mine, but what's yours is also mine. It starts with an attitude first of, let's get clarity and separation here. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. Okay. Now, the Samer Ben Yaina has a very charitable definition of the word Amaretz, but the truth of the matter is that we have to look at the words of the Tana very carefully. An Amaretz is not a Russia. These are not synonymous terms. Usually an Amaretz is a pejorative. Usually in Chazal, when we talk about an Amaretz, we mean an ignorant person, an unlettered person. There's a very famous and biting Chazal that say that more than the nations of the world hate Israel, the Amaratzim hate the Talmidei Chachamim. Right? Nevertheless, the way the Rabbi Yaina defines Amaretz over here is as what we would call a man of the world. Am Haaretz, a nation of the land, of the world. In other words, really there's a guy, in his words, who wants tikkun ha'olam. He wants a repaired world, he wants a rectified world. Wouldn't it be wonderful, if you study something about the theory of socialism / communism, on paper it sounds wonderful, it sounds very good. I want somebody to tell me what the difference is between the famous communist maxim slogan, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, and this approach of the Amharitz here in this mission of Pirkei Avos. Shali shalach, what's mine is yours. Shalach shalim, what's yours is mine. Shali shalach, my talents, my ability is yours. From each according to his ability. Yeah. Shalach shali, and what's yours is mine. 2 each according to his need. To me, it's 6 of one, half a dozen others. It's 2 ways of saying the same thing, and that sounds wonderful. A socialist society, a society with the common ownership of the means of production, sounds terrific. So the Rabbi Yana goes kind of easy on him. He says, Amaretz over here doesn't have the usual connotation of a terribly negative connotation, completely. Basically, it means a man of the world, a man who would like to see an improved world, a fair world. Is it really so fair, right? That 80% of the world's wealth is tied up in the hands of only 10% of the world's people? What's so fair about that?
So the man of the world is like Robin Hood, so to speak?
Kind of. However, he says this much of the traditional definition of Amaretz remains. This lacks chachma. This lacks intelligence and brains. Why? Not the part about shali shalach, what's mine is yours. But the part about shalach shali, what's yours is mine. Why? Because we have an idea, a philosophy that's sonei matanei sichya. Someone who hates gifts, that's a person who shall live. Right? It's not good to be somebody dependent on the handouts of others. Yeah. It's not a secret, a recipe for life. On a deeper level, I've heard it explained. Sefer Pachid Yitzchak explains it like this. A classic explanation of why this is for the Tillam group upstairs. This is not for us. Classic explanation for why we even live on this world. It's in 2 words. The Zoharic formulation for that. The answer for that classic question is why? Why human existence? What are we even doing here? And the Zohar answers Nahama de Ksufa. It's the bread of humiliation. Or the longer version is Man da ochel to lav dilay ba'is listakule bate. Somebody who eats that which is not his, you're afraid to look the donor in the face. It's more than afraid. You're humiliated. You're ashamed. You're reduced. Nobody wants handouts. A normal, healthy psyche, a normal human being, would rather have one kav, one measure of something that he produced or that he earned, than 2 measures of something that was given to him as a gift. It was gifted to him. And the idea is that the currency, so to speak, with which Hashem is paying off neshamas for their good work while they lived here in this world, is really identical to what they had before they were alive too. What's our conception of the world to come? Tzadikim yoshim v'atarasem v'Hashem v'nehenim b'ziv hashchina. The righteous sit with their crowns upon their heads, and they bask in the glory of the shine of the Shekhinah. And you think they're doing anything different before they were born? What else is Hashem doing? Basically, it means proximity to Hashem. That's the whole reward. That's what it's all about. But basically, in the shorthand, it's not that the currency changes, it's the quality of the currency changes. You went from taking a welfare check to taking a paycheck. That's really what the whole trip, chiyus, vitality, living in this world, is really all about. So, sonei matan ziyachid, the whole yesod, the whole foundation, the whole fundamental idea of living, all right, is that you don't want gifts. You want to earn. You don't want to be gifted. You don't want to be on the dole. You don't want handouts. You want to be able to earn something, to say that you earned your own keep. All right? So there's something very corrosive. And that's why I said before that communism looks very good on paper. A lot of the social welfare programs of left-leaning democratic policies from the New Deal till LBJ's, war on poverty, up to and including our time President-elect Obama, everyone's heart is on the right place. There are a lot of needy people out there, and sometimes, people need a handout. That's part of that. The problem is, we know, though, from experience, from sociological observation, that sometimes this is a cycle of dependency that people never break out of. They're used to living on the dole, and they lose all self-respect, and they never think much of themselves. And because they don't think much of themselves, they give up on the American dream, whatever you want to call it. The point is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Sometimes you want to help a person, but that's not the way to help him. Give a man a fish, he'll eat fish in one day. Teach him to fish, and he could be supported for his whole life. So the idea of being able to say even not in a totally selfish, totally greedy way, like the Russian in a few lines. But to be able to say, Shalcha Shali, that which is yours is mine also, that's an Amaritz talking. That's not an intelligent person talking. Maybe a good-hearted person, maybe a person who's dreaming of a better society, but the smart person understands it's Saina Matanas Yechia. If I want to live, I've got to be essentially a giver and not a taker. How can everybody be givers? Somebody's got to be a taker. I don't know. That's a problematic kind of calculus, right? But the notion that I should want to be a taker and to be able to say it blithely, just as easily as I'm a giver, that's the attitude and the words of an Am Haaretz. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
The Meiri has a little bit of a different approach. The Meiri in his commentary on Pirkei Avos says that the difference between the Beinoni and the Midas Stone is in a case of something called Zenehana V'Zelei Chaser, to use the Talmudic jargon. Zenehana V'Zelei Chaser means when you have Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven owns property that Shimon can derive benefit from without in any way reducing the value of Reuven's property. Okay? Give me an example in a Chayvetz mitzvah. Okay? And this is actually a halachic distinction. Normally we say that shoyel shleimi das gazlan. If you borrow something without somebody's permission, that's a kind of a gezel, it's a kind of a theft. Okay? Can't just say, the guy left his bike unlocked over here, and I need to travel for 2 blocks, and he's working now anyway, he won't need it for 2 hours, I'm going to borrow, it'll be back before he even knows it, he won't be the wiser.
Unless it's your friend, it's okay, right?
Right. There are exceptions to the rule, I'm just saying what the default setting is. However, the Gemara says that when it comes to a cheftz in the mitzvah, right, then it's okay. Right? I don't have to ask somebody to borrow their tefillin. Their tefillin are there, they're done with it, they daven shachris already, I'm going to a later minyan, I can borrow their talis and tefillin. Why? Because we say, we have a default assumption about people, they're more than happy to help others, or that others should have the schus of a mitzvah through their private property.
What about grape juice on Shabbos?
Grape juice on Shabbos is different because you're taking away the Karen. That's exactly
Consuming.
You're consuming. That's the point. The point is I'll tell you something that's even a little bit finer, a little bit more subtle than grape juice. The exception to the rule over here is svarim. At least at the times when the Mishnah Brewer was writing. I don't know, maybe today svarim are cheaper and then the bindings are better. You cannot borrow somebody's sefer without their permission because some are very delicate. You tear a page, you break the binding, you drop some water on it, and the print smudges. Right? It's very possible that you're going to ruin the sefer that they have. But a more durable mitzvah good, a lulav and esrog, a talis, a tefillin, something like that, the presumption is, even if it's a lot more valuable than a sefer, right? A good pair of tefillin can save you back quite a bit of money. It doesn't matter. They're not delicate things. If you're not totally stupid and negligent with them, they're not going to get hurt. So basically, this is a good illustration of the difference between what we call zenehana v'zeh loy chaser and zenehana v'zeh chaser. Is B deriving benefit without A losing anything? Or is B deriving benefit, but A is going to lose something? His sefer will get torn, his bike will get a flat, his grape juice will be consumed, right? So, says the Meiri.
Responsibility also to make sure that if you do something with somebody else's property, that return it in the same condition as when you...
I understand, but it's also a question of when they're not around to ask their permission, what can we assume about had they been here, would they give us permission? That's the only thing that allows a person to use it without the owner's presence. Okay. So I think I've given you a good illustration of what it means zenehana v'zeh loy chaser. Zenehana v'zeh loy chaser would be an example of borrowing the guy's talis. Zenehana v'zeh chaser would be an example of borrowing a sefer or his grape juice. So the Meiri says, here's where you have the difference between a Beinoni and a Stomite. A Beinoni where it's zenehana v'zeh lo chaser. Can I borrow your bike let's say he is around. Can I borrow your bike to travel 2 blocks? It's a smooth road. There's no ice on the ground. I've driven those 2 blocks hundreds of times. Nothing ever happened to my bike. the wear and tear, so to speak, on the gears, on the rubbers on the tires is infinitesimal, yeah, go ahead. Right? Even though I hold shali, shali, v'shalach, shalach. I'm not losing anything by you borrowing here. Right? However, if, and even in that case, say, look, I don't ask to borrow your bike, you don't ask to borrow my bike. My bike is my bike, your bike is your bike, good afternoon, leave me alone. That's already a midah stam. That's where you have the difference between a midah beinoni and a midah stam.
But what if you're going to be totally careful with a sefer and not ruin it?
I don't know. You have to ask your Rav. I just remember the Psai. I told you when I said over the Mishnah Berurah that I think things might be different in 2008 than in 1908 when he was writing the halacha. You know, so how big do you think the Chofetz Chaim's whole library was? Right?
Oh, in 1908,
a guy in Ilam, right? He wrote the voluminous Mishnah Berurah. You know, it was all from a database up here. It wasn't because he had a 12,000 volume personal library. Understand?
Oh, so that was done.
Possibly. I don't know. You'd have to ask a Rav if circumstances have changed enough to change the practical halacha. I'm not talking halacha l'maisa. I mean, some people certainly in yeshivas, some guys, write into their svarim, mutar l'shtamish b'mkaimai. It's fine by me if you use my sefer. Just leave it on the table, leave it on my shtander. I don't want to have to, go searching around for it later because you borrowed my sefer. Okay. He has a very novel pshat. The Meiri on what it says here that the meat of the Am Haaretz. Shali shalach shali shalach v'shalach shali. What's mine is yours, yours is mine. He says that's not generosity or communism talking. Okay? That's I got a raw deal talking. That's what that means is as follows. Okay? He says it's rare to find heirs of an estate. Even if everything goes according to halacha, al pi Torah, al pi halacha, the father of the deceased left over at Savar where he spelled out very clearly who was supposed to get what, right? Or when you have partners who have to dissolve their partnership, okay, they have to liquefy their assets or some other way of splitting the partnership, and everything is right. It's a 50-50 split. It's very rare to find anyone who's happy with what happened. Everybody says, there's some big mistake over here. What I got, that one should have got. What that one should have got, I should have got. It's a famous Borscht Bell community. The guy's lying there on the deathbed. Mama, I'm about to die, and before I go, I want to settle some things. I want our son Jackie should have the business. And he says, Papa, Jackie's going to make changes. He's going to run the business into the ground. Bet he should give it to Freddie. All right, Mama, let it go to Freddie. But our house in the country should go to our daughter Doris. He says, Doris, what do you want to give that house in the country to Doris for? Doris, she doesn't even have any children. Give it to Linda. Linda's got a big family. She'll get something out of it. All right, Mama, let it go to Linda. But my new Chrysler with the white wall tires, I want should go to Ricky. Papa, Ricky, you know how wild he is with the car and the way he runs around with the girls. You can't give the car to Ricky. He says, okay, give the car to Jackie. But that fine art oil painting, I want it should go to Linda. Papa, Mama, who's dying here, you or me? Right? Everybody has a better idea about who should have gotten what, right? That's what it means over here, shali, shalach, shalach, shali. What I got, you should have gotten what I got. What am I doing stuck with it? This is crummy what I got. This is what I need, that's what you need. For shalach, what you got, that's what I want. That's the meat of an Am Haaretz. It's a person who doesn't recognize the rectitude of the Chukei HaTorah and dissolving partnerships and an inheritance law and or / Am Haaretz we usually associate in Pirkei Avos as somebody lacking sufficient amunah, lacking sufficient bitachon. You don't believe there's a God running the world, that something of this has to do with the way the personal God of history directed this property into your hands. then you have this idea that what went to you should have gone to me, what went to me should have gone to you. So that's already an amaretz. The Ruach Chaim says a very interesting thing, and you have to. The Ruach Chaim was Rav Chaim Volozhin's Pirush on Pirkei Avos, and he says as follows. He says,
it's only on Pirkei Avos, the whole Ruach Chaim?
Ruach Chaim, yeah, that's the name of his sefer from Pirkei Avos. He's got other stories, but the name of his sefer from Pirkei Avos is Ruach Chaim.
That's Chaim, I learned it, I don't know.
Right. So at any rate, in Ruach Chaim, the Rav Chaim Volozhin says as follows, and you have to know that this really harkens back to the first Mishnah of Pirkei Avos, second Mishnah of Pirkei Avos. Something that Rav Chaim Volozhin says that. Second Mishnah of Pirkei Avos says, the world stands on three pillars, al atar, al avad, al gemilas chasadim. So most people, most paintings you see, you'll have these stylized pictures of an earth flying in the clouds and three Romanesque, Greco-Roman pillars, and one will say Torah, one will say Avodah, one will say Gemilas Chasadim. Chaim Volozhin says, no, you have to braid the pillars. Torah defines the other two pillars. Right? Without Torah, we don't know what Avodah is, and we don't know what Gemilas Chasadim is. And he gives beautiful examples. He says, before the Torah was given, the Spirit moves somebody, he wants to worship Hashem, he puts together a bunch of rocks in his backyard, he slaughters a goat, voila, it's a carbon. After the Torah is given, and after we have a Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, that becomes a grave sin. That becomes an esekaris. It's called Shchutei Chutz. So Torah defines what Avodah is and what Avodah isn't, and what Avodah Zarah is, and what Avodah Zarah isn't, and so on. Gemilas Chasadim. What would you say to a guy in these newly tough credit times who would say, I'm going to give you a 15-year mortgage at a 0.5% percentage rate? What a prince, I love you. You're not a human being, you're an angel. And these times you're giving me, with my credit history, you're giving me a 0.5% mortgage for 15 years? Unbelievable. Right? Before Matan Torah, the guy would talk to be a prince, the guy would be an angel, says Rav Chaim Volozhin. Right? The day after Matan Torah, if both of you are Jews and you don't write a Hatariska, he's not getting up for Tchias HaMesim. He's a Malva B'Ribbis.
Why?
What?
Why?
The law changed with Matan Torah. It's called Ribbis. It's interest. He's a usurer. Jews have to lend other Jews Gemachim, interest-free loans. You take even a 0.5% interest, Ribbis P'tutza, you're a Malva B'Ribbis.
What about mortgage companies? Mortgaging houses and cars.
Those are corporate entities. There's a famous tshuva from Moshe Feinstein. The laws of Ribbis do not apply, even if there are Jewish stockholders in the company. Those are not loans between people. Those are inanimate entities. Just as a Jew is allowed to borrow or lend to a non-Jew with Ribbis, and vice versa, the corporate entity, the bank or the mortgage company that's lending you the money doesn't have the din of a Jew, even if there are Jewish stockholders. Famous landmark tshuva from Moshe. He wrote this tshuva in the 40s and the 50s. It was a question. You had Jewish-owned banks or Jewish stockholders in banks. Did you need a Hatariska before you took out It's the other way around too. If you have a savings account, an interest-bearing account in a bank, so now you're the lender and they're the borrower. You're also charging ribbis. Same problem. Okay. At any rate, says over here, the Rav Chaim Volozhin on our Mishnah, he says, an amaretz, in this case, means a person who could be a very intelligent person, but he's going with the seichel anushi. He's going with regular human rationale. And with regular human rationale, right, a lot of things that according to the Torah, right, we say it in davening every day, yeah, chukim v'mishpat Yisrael, lo yasachen l'chol gai u'mishpatim ba'yadam, hallelujah, right? He gave chukim and mishpatim to the Jewish people, and he didn't do so to the other nations of the world, and he didn't inform them of his mishpatim, hallelujah, right? But there are very many things in Shulchan Aruch Chayshim Mishpat that are counterintuitive. Here's a good example. This is a very good example of one, right? Guy charges me half a percent interest. I shouldn't give it to him? Of course it belongs to him. What a generous guy. No, you shouldn't give it to him, right? So he's saying an amaretz, a person who's not savvy to the Torah sensibility of personal property, such a person will walk through life looking at things that shali shalach v'shalach shali, what's yours legally. Not I'm greedy, not I'm being rapacious. Just good old common horse sense. That thing, that's mine. Belongs to me. What's mine should be yours. But if you know the laws of the Torah, very often it's not like that. Now, I just want to say parenthetically, since you seem to be very concerned with halacha l'maisa, that you have to know that there are times when we say dina de malchusa dina, it's the one area of Torah law where what the dominant culture dictates has some impact. In monetary law, there is a concept, sometimes, I'm saying very broadly, where we say dina de malchusa dina. A guy can't say, I'm going to be an income tax cheat, I'm not going to pay my income taxes. Because where does it say in the Torah that I'm mechuyev to pay the income tax? No, it could be a God-fearing Jew without paying income tax. To such a person, we say, "We're sorry, dina malchusa dina. You're living in the United States of America. You're a citizen. The government has the right to levy taxes. It's a duly elected, it's a legitimate government, right? You can't opt out and say, well, I'm a mitzvah-abiding Jew. I'm not a law-abiding U.S. citizen. We don't say such a thing. All right? However, what happens when you do have a contradiction in something where two Jews should be going to a bezdin, right? And instead they go to a civil court. It's a very serious matter. You're not always allowed to do that. You can't automatically say, well, dina malchusa trumps chesed mishpat. It's very complicated. When you do say it, when you don't say it, it's, I felt I should speak it out before we move on.
And see what Torah says.
Exactly. Okay. Finally, before we move on to the next Mishnah, I'll just tell you an unbelievable vart from the Rabbi of Pshischa. Chassidic master Rabbi Benim says, everyone learns Pshat in this Mishnah. We're talking about Ben al-Chaver, we're talking about interpersonal relationships. All right? Property. Shali shalach, shalach shalach, shali shalcha, shalcha shali, and so on and so forth. Simcha Benim of Pshischa interprets his Mishnah that the person is talking to God himself. And we know that there's a split between human responsibility and divine responsibility. Hakol b'dei shamayim, chutz miyir shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven, is in Hashem's hands, except for Yir Shamayim, except our fear of heaven, which really means except for our bechira chashus, except for how we serve Hashem. Right? So he says like this: the ultimate Am Haaretz is the one who says like this: Shali shalach. What's mine is yours. What is mine? What really belongs? Where's a human being autonomous? My Yir Shamayim. Because Yir Shamayim, Hashem, that's yours. That's up to you. My neighbor's a bigger Yirei Shamayim than me. You made him that way. He was born that way. I remember him in grade school. He was always a goody-goody. He was always somebody who followed the rules. Me, you made me a Vildachaya. I was a rambunctious kid. And that's the way it is. People are bigger tzaddikim or lesser tzaddikim. That's by the divine grace of God. He makes that chiluf. He makes that switch. Instead of understanding what is his and where he's really autonomous and where he really has personal responsibility, he's a shali. What ought to be mine? That's shalcha. That's yours. The shalach and the hakol b'dei shamayim. How good my health is going to be, how good my business is going to be, that's shali. That belongs to me. If I'm successful in business, God had nothing to do with it. I was smarter than the competition. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a great businessman. The strength and the craft of my hand made all of this wealth for me. He says that's the ultimate Amaritz. That's what he says is another meaning over here.
Every single thing is divinely ordained?
Except for how we serve Hashem.
So this is divinely ordained? Did I do that just now?
Yes, it is.
And this right now, that is divinely ordained. Me turning the paper, me saying every single word and moving my hands like this, everything.
Well, that depends. What was your movement of the water bottle and the paper something that somehow or another impacted your service of God? Then it was up to you. If it wasn't, then it was ordained.
It's part of me asking a question, which is learning so that I'm serving God.
So in that case, it was up to you. You'll ask me the question of, if it was foreknown by God, then I really did not have free will. That's one of the great philosophical conundrums. We call that Yediyah and Bechira. How do you reconcile the idea of Bechira Chavshis, of free will, in terms of doing mitzvahs and avoiding Averis, with an all-knowing, infallible God? That's one of the great mysteries. That's not something I'm equipped to answer. So in the last 10 minutes of a class on a different topic.
You had the choice to either sit here and learn, or you could have turned on the camera and gone somewhere else. So that was your choice.
Are you here for this class?
Yeah.
Okay, it started over an hour ago. You should just know for the future if you want to come. We're just wrapping it up. Okay, I'm going to do one more mission. We'll try to do it quick. The next mission. Arba Midas B'Deyas. Mishnah Yudal on the bottom of page 574. Arba Midas B'Deyas. If you don't mind just signing in. I've never seen you here before, so this way you'll be on our mailing list. Arba Midas B'Deyas. Nayach Lichais V'Nayach Lirtzais. Yatzaschar B'Efseide. Kosher Lichais V'Kosher Lirtzais. Yatzef Seide B'Schare. Kosher Lichais V'Nayach Lirtzais. Chosid. Nayach lichais v'kasher litzais, Russia. There are 4 types of temperament. One who is angered easily and pacified easily, his gain is offset by his loss. In other words, the bottom line is he's a loser. Okay, he's at a loss. One who is hard to anger and hard to pacify, his loss is offset by his gain. Okay, his bottom line, so to speak, is in the black. He has a loss, but it's more than offset, it's more than made up for by the gain. One who is hard to anger and easy to pacify is pious. Chassid is the Hebrew word. One who is easily angry and hard to pacify is wicked. Okay, so the simple meaning of the Mishnah, before we get into what all the Mefarshim say, is pretty self-explanatory. You have a guy who's emotionally volatile, okay, irascible, not a person who handles stress well, but not really a bad person, right? Not a hateful person. We'll put it that way. Okay, so such people have short fuses. Right? It's very easy to get under their skin, and they might lash out, they might scream, they might utter an expletive at you. Okay, but then you tell them, look, you didn't understand, you misunderstood me. Take it easy. You're having a hard day. I'm gonna have a hard day too. Usually, these are not the type of people who bear grudges. Right? On the other hand, the colder personality type, shall we call them, people who have long fuses, some may take a long time till they get angry, weeks and weeks, and they handle stress very well. They're unflappable. They're very good under pressure. But eventually, things build up, and one day, a straw that breaks the camel's back happens, and then they let you have it, right? And now they let you have it, the same way it took them forever to get angry, it'll take them forever to calm down too. Once you get them angry, then watch out. Then you've earned yourself an enemy. These are the kind of people who bear grudges. Right? Nevertheless, the Mishnah says that the second type of person is superior to the first type of person. The first type of person, his gain, meaning his ability to be easily appeased, is offset by his loss, by the fact that he blows his top, or she blows the top very frequently and easily. The other guy is better off. Even though he does bear a grudge, and it's hard to make him calm down and to ask their forgiveness afterwards, it's still better that way. Obviously, there's somebody who combines the worst elements of both, is a Russian. If a person flies off the handle easily, and then it takes forever to make them calm down, to make them forgive you, that's a Russian. And the best person is somebody who has a very long fuse, but even when they lose it, they only lose it for a little while, and it's very easy to make your peace with it. Okay, that's the simple meaning of the Mishnah. The Rambam says on this Mishnah that very short, very succinct and brief things. And again, this alludes to another very famous Chazal. The Adam Nikar b'shloisha dvarim. You can tell the character of a human being by 3 things. Alliteratively, it says, b'kiso, b'koso, b'kaso. Okay? By his pocket, meaning by his generosity, that was really the last Mishnah. B'koso, by his drink. In other words, how sober a person is, how often does this guy, lose his wits? Uvikaso, and by his anger. Right? So the Rambam just says very succinctly, okay, that one of the yardsticks that we see from this Mishnah, in whether a person is a Rasha or a Chassid, which a Chassid is really even a higher level than a Tzaddik, right? Somebody who goes above and beyond the call of duty, is through their anger. Rashi says the reason that the person with the short fuse but easily appeased is inferior to the person with the long fuse is because when you're angry, when you're in a state of anger, you come to a lot of other sins. For example, I gave you a scenario which is very common, which I've seen before. When people are angry, very often they utter expletives. Right? And expletives are something that we call nivel peh. Right? Sometimes when people are angry, they break things. And maybe it's not their property. And even if you plan on making restitution to the property, damaging other people's property is sinful behavior. Right? Sometimes when you're angry, okay, you lose it. You insult a person. You hurt another person's feelings. Right? And that's a sin. You overreact. You don't just react, you overreact. So, Rashi says that the point of, the Rambam seems to say, the very state of the emotion of anger is itself a certain rishus. Okay, Rashi says maybe the state of anger is not the rishus, is not the evil in and of itself. However, it can lead to a multitude of other sins. Rabbi Yonah says that when a person is angry, you do sins that are very, very difficult to repair later. In general, it's a good rule of thumb that even though the institution of teshuvah exists, and really it's for the average human being, it's their Pesach Tikva, it's their opening of hope. They couldn't live their lives without teshuvah. It's the ability, famous words of Rav Nachman Bresler, if you have the belief that you have the capacity to ruin, then you have to believe that you have the capacity to repair. Right?
But there's still a stain, sort of?
No, it's not a question that there's still a stain, but it's much better not to ruin in the first place. That everyone's in agreement. You might believe that you have the power to do both things, but all things considered, it's better not to ruin it in the first place. Forget who they say this are, from the Brisker Rav, from Chaim Soloveitchik, a famous Meiser. I think they were talking about what the difference is between a Rav and a Balagola. A Balagola, is a wagon driver. Usually, in Jewish folklore, it's associated with the polar extreme. Right? He says, a Balagola, one time, I don't remember if it was Reb Chaim Brisker or Brisker Rav. He says, Brisker Rav, he says, I'm smarter than you. They always say Rabbanim are smart, and Balagola, I'm Haaretz. You want to know what happened to me yesterday? He says, it was a rainy day, and the roads were in very bad condition, and 3 out of my 4 wheels got sunk in the mud. Okay? And I had the know-how, I had the ingenuity, I knew how to get my wagon out of the mud. He says, what would you have done if you were in that position? Would you have any idea how to get a wagon that 3 of the wheels are sunk in the mud, how to winch it out of there, how to get it out of there? And the Brisker Rav had to him and said, no, I don't think I would have known how to solve that problem. He says, so where do you get the arrogance to say that you're smarter than me? And he says, because, my dear Balagola, I never would have gotten my wagon stuck with 3 wheels in the mud in the first place. Mm-hmm. All right? So it's always better not to fall into sin than to say, well, there's always tshuva. Right? And Rabbi Yonah adds like this, a very, very interesting thing. In the midah of the chassid, okay, he doesn't say about the chassid that a chassid is somebody who never gets angry and is easily appeased. He says he's slow to anger and he's easily appeased. I would think, look, that's a tzaddik. A chassid should be something better than that. Tzaddik should be somebody who never gets angry in the first place. He says, and this is so fundamental. I say this whenever I give a shir, whenever I give a class on midas, I repeat and reiterate this again and again, that all the Bali Muslim, that etymologists say that the Hebrew word for a character trait, a midah, and the Hebrew word for weights and measure is the same word. A midah and a mishkal. It's because there is nothing in the hand that God dealt us that's useless. We normally associate, we have our good midas, we have our generosity, and we have our empathy, and we have our softness and our kindness. Those are all the good midas, right? And then we have our greed and our lust and our need for glorification, and those are all bad midas. It's not true. Jealousy, those are all bad midas. It's not true. Exactly. Everything, if it's measured, is proper. A small amount of a bad midah can be good. An excess of a good midah can be bad. He says, here's a golden example of that. He says, you can't be without anger. Okay? There's evil in the world. There's a need for righteous indignation. There are times you're going to have to get angry. Would you say that Pinchas would have been a bigger chassid than he was had he not gotten angry at the episode with Zimri and Cosby? That's Mamash's example. You have to have a capacity for anger. However, if you're a chassid, you're very slow to anger, because 9 times out of 10 we may talk it into ourselves that it's righteous indignation, but more often than not it's a petty personal thing that's getting us angry. So if you're slow,
Rabbi Akiva laughed when he saw the fox going over the destruction.
In the base of Ignash.
right? So what do you want with that?
So he didn't cry over that. He wasn't angry at that. He laughed. He saw it. He wasn't angry even at that. He saw the good.
First of all, anger I don't think would have been the appropriate emotion at that point. Sadness was what all of his colleagues were seeing over there.
Okay.
All right. So,
He saw the redemption from
what?
He saw the redemption.
Okay. So he had better vision, so to speak, than his colleagues.
Good, so you don't have to get angry. You could have better vision, that it's for the good, and that. And what about Gam Ish Gam?
But I'm asking you a question. If Rabbi Akiva had been present by the Maisa of Pinchas and Zimri, do you think his reaction would have been any different than Pinchas? So it's not, you're comparing apples and oranges. The fox coming out of the Beis Kadashim, and the times when you have to get angry at the signing of Hashem, there are 2 separate things.
What about Ish Gamzu? Nachum Ish Gamzu.
Right.
He never got angry. He said, "This is for the good."
When everything that I know, anyway, maybe you know more Midrash Chazal about Nachum Ish Gamzu than I'm familiar with, but everything I know about Nachum Ish Gamzu was talking about personal setbacks in his own life. There weren't examples of Rishayim doing Averis B'Fahasi and Chilul Hashem's. Again, I don't think even Nachum Ish Gamzu would have been blasé about somebody takes a Sefer Torah out of shul and rolls it in the mud and has people trample on it. I don't think it was Gamzu L'Torah.
Zusha, that example that like when they would kick him, in a bar or something like that, well, I deserve to be kicked or something like that.
Whatever. Any example that you can come up with is personal setbacks. It's not a phantom of Chilul Hashem, which we should reserve.
What about rolling a Torah? What about rolling a Torah around in the mud? That's not Gamzu Tova.
What?
What about someone does take that Sefer Torah Chaz v'Shalom and rolls it in the mud? That's not Gamzu
I
Tova.
want to ask you a question. Okay, let's not talk so cosmic. Let's not talk about the Holocaust. Okay, there are 2 brachas in our lexicon of benedictions. There's a bracha called Dayan Ha'emes, and there's a bracha called Hatov Ha'meitiv. Okay, when a close relative dies, okay, that you're not getting any inheritance from, close relative dies, somebody you've got to sit shiva for. Do you say Gamzu L'Taiva and say, Baruch Atah Hashem Atayva Ha'meitiv?
No, but isn't
Or do you
it
say
Gamzu
Dynamis?
Tova?
What?
No, but isn't it?
No, it's not.
Why?
Because you're out of touch with your own emotions and reality. If you say
not
Gamzu
everything's
L'Taiva,
for the good.
it's for the good, but you don't have that sensibility.
It's relative and objective.
No.
Is it or isn't it? Is it for the good? Is everything for the good, or is not everything for the good?
We don't have the capacity to recognize in this world how everything is for the good.
But is that the truth that everything is for the good?
Of course it's the truth.
So then,
Everything
recognize
comes
or
from
not,
Hashem.
it is for the good.
Everything comes from Hashem.
What you're saying is 100% incorrect. If you made, on the death of a relative, you made the bracha Hatay V'Meitiv, you committed an Avera. You were Mitzvah Shem Shemal L'Vatala. It's a bracha
No, it's
L'Vatala.
Baruch Dainas, but it's for the
But what?
good.
But what?
For the good.
So then why don't you make the bracha Hatay V'Meitiv?
I don't know, I'm just asking.
I do know. You want to hear the answer? The answer is because the Achdus of Hashem that we declare in Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is not something that's evident in this world. There's a world where there's a problem of theodicy. There's a problem of an unanswered question of why do the righteous suffer. We don't know the answer to that question. We don't have, in the way we're wired, the way our neshamas are set up in this world, we don't have the capacity to recognize that. We say it as an act of faith. A Jew has the sensibility to say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Right? But that's in anticipation for when Mashiach comes, when Eliyahu Hanavi comes, and all of these imponderable questions are answered. But in the here and now, there are 2 brachas. There's not Mida, it's Chazal. That's the baseline touch of Kriya Shema. Like Olam Haba, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Shu Elokeinu B'Olam Hazeh, Hu Asad Liyetz Hashem Echad L'Olam Haba. Hashem, who is our God in this world, will be Hashem Echad in the next world. That's one interpretation of Kriya Shema. Another interpretation of Kriya Shema is, Like Olam Haba, Olam Hazeh. The next world is not like this world. This world, there are two brachas. Hatayv HaMeitiv and Dynamis. In the world to come, there will only be the one bracha of Hatayv HaMeitiv. But evil is a mirage. But not to those of us living in the mirage. Those of us living in the mirage, it's a reality. The question of the sensibility, of the sensitivity, of how close you approach the look of Olam Haba, that's what separates a Nacham Ish Gamzu from a rank and file Jew. Can you work on it? To try to get that sensibility later. We have a lot of that example, like I'd mentioned, the Rebbe Zusha Vanapo, and other great tzaddikim who had more of the sensibility. But to say in an absolute sense that in the here and now world before Mashiach comes, there's nothing wrong going on. There's nothing we have to have aveilus for. Even Rabbi Akiva, who laughed when the shul came out of the Beis Kodesh Gadashim. You don't think he said kinnis on Tisha B'Av? What do I have to say kinnis on Tisha B'Av anymore? I saw the fox coming out of the Kodesh Gadashim. It's all good. A Jew has to have the capacity for what we call holy schizophrenia. You got to be able to hold two mutually exclusive thoughts in your head at the same time. As Mashiach's coming, and in an abstract sense, I understand that all is for the good. That doesn't mean that there's no avails.
Is it a Gemara? I think that's somebody wanted to come along with Eliyahu Navi, and the person comes and they slaughtered the cow, and they said, well, how come you slaughtered the cow? It was the last cow, and the person came, and then Eliyahu said, well, if it wouldn't be the cow, she would have died, or something like that. Is it?
I'm totally unfamiliar with the Gemara. You're either not saying it off well, or I'm not familiar with the Gemara. I'm sorry.
That was her last.
Okay, look, I think we had kind of a long question and answer period over here. I think we'll truncate the shir at this point. We'll call it a night, and that's it.